Let's try the upper body compression sequence and add to it the outer shoulder blade, the arm, and the chest gliding and shearing before we do the upper back rinse side. So just like we would start the basic upper body compression sequence, we want to start with a basic rib length assess. So the roller is going to end up somewhere into the middle shoulder girdle so that the bottom of the shoulder blades are on your side of the roller. The pelvis is going to remain in a slight tuck. You'll take a breath in, and on an exhale, we're going to go through rib length, taking a nice focused breath and just assessing how much tension you feel like you have in the front of your chest to create extension, and then come back into flexion. You can also create your rib extension, the length, and create a side bend to the right, inhaling and exhaling into the left side of the body, just to identify if there's any stuck stress on the left side, and then side bending to the left, inhaling and exhaling to sort of identify if there's any tension on the right side of the body. And then the second time you do the side bend, just notice how far do you move to the right, and then how far do you move to the left, and then come on back to the center. So let's try our gliding and shearing on the upper back and inner shoulder blade. So we're going to start on the upper back. So you're going to lift up your hips, and wherever the roller feels like it is right now, you're just going to move the roller up a few inches, reset your feet, and in the upper part of your back, I want you to begin creating a gentle gliding on the upper part of your back, just exploring this tissue for any accumulated stress, allowing the movement to get smaller and smaller and smaller until you just stop, sit down your pelvis, sustain your tuck, create a slight bit of flexion, and create a little tipping action to create side bending. And then come on back to a center point. Take a nice focused breath. And let's find another spot. You're going to lift up your hips, you're going to push your feet into the floor and move the roller down around the bra line, reset your feet, and I want you to try your gliding again, a nice small local compression just to create a little bit of a fluid exchange around the rib wall and exploring the tissue for barriers or areas of restriction. And then again, get smaller and smaller and smaller until you just stop, set your hips down, and to shear, you'll create a direct shear by creating a slight tipping right and left to shear the spine itself. And then come on back to a center point and wait. Take another focused breath. Lift up your hips. Let's try one more spot, moving the roller down below the bra line. And here, when you're very low in the mid-back, your hips are practically on the ground. Back stays in that nice natural curve, creating your gliding, getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and then again, setting your hips down to the floor, creating your flexion and that slight tipping action. And then come on back to the center and wait. So to get on the shoulder blades, on the inside edge of your shoulder blade to begin, we're going to start on the left side of the body. So you guys are going to slightly tip your right elbow up toward the ceiling, lift up your hip, and we're going to start on the inside edge of your left shoulder blade, swirling around the inferior border and the medial border of the scapula, kind of cruising around the whole inside edge, remembering that the elbows are staying slightly pointed inward so that you can really access the inside of the blade. Getting smaller and smaller in this motion until you just stop. Release the arm from behind your head and create an indirect shear by just creating a slight motion of the arm in front of the body. You can always shorten the lever and keep the elbow bent and create that same indirect shear. And then bring your hand back behind your head and wait. So to add to this side, we'll start with the outer shoulder blade. So you're going to go ahead and turn on your side, rest your head in your hands so that your forearm is resting somewhat onto the roller and the upper arm is 100% on the roller. And you're just going to tip your body back. So now I'm definitely on the outside edge of my shoulder blade and using a little side bending action with my ribs to move the roller up and down the outside edge of my shoulder blade. I'm going to glide against the blade. Same thing here, I'm going to get smaller and smaller and smaller until I identify an area I want to work on, creating that lean back. I'm going to create my indirect shear by just moving my arm over the roller 4 or 5 times. And then I'm going to bring my hand back behind my head and wait and give the tissue time to adapt. Then I'm going to work on the arm. I'm going to bring my arm under my body. I'm going to rest the roller somewhere on the lower border of my deltoid. And in this position, I'm going to use my top hand as a resting place for my head, resting my forehead down onto my palm. And here it's a little bit more of a curling action instead of a side bend, allowing the roller to move up and down my shoulder and arm. And here I'm just going to get smaller and smaller in the motion, and to shear here I can do my indirect shear with rotation of the humerus, or the upper arm bone, just internally and externally rotating my arm. Or I can keep my arm resting on the ground and I can do a direct shear like cross friction, just to punch my arm forward and back. And then I'm just going to wait here for a second and give the tissue a moment to adapt. To get on my chest, I'm going to come up, I'm going to drop my left arm behind me, and I'm going to allow my chest to rest onto the roller below my collarbones. Again, using my other hand as a resting place for my head so that my neck doesn't have to work. And here again, I'm going to create a little curling in and out so that I'm really staying on the chest and the front of the shoulder, gliding through this area, getting smaller and smaller until I just stop. And then to create the friction, the cross friction, I'm going to kind of drag my torso left to right to create the shear. If I want to, I could even take the other hand down onto the ground if I'm comfortable to remove my hand from my head. And then I'm going to wait here for a second and give the tissue a moment to adapt. So let's try all of those moves on the other side. So I'm going to still face the camera here. So I want you guys to start on your right shoulder blade this time. So you're going to bring your elbows up toward the ceiling, slightly lift and tip your body to the right side so you'll be on the inside edge of your shoulder blade. And begin with your gentle gliding around the inside edge and bottom border of the shoulder blade. And again, sort of exploring this tissue, trying to find any areas that feel like they have any tenderness or stickiness to them. Getting smaller and smaller until you just meet the barrier. Release your hip down and move your arm any which way you want above the body for your indirect shear. Remembering it's just about sustaining your compression on the shoulder blade as you move that fascial tissue by moving the arm. And then bring your hand back behind your head, wait here for a second. Then you get onto the outside of the shoulder blade, just turn yourself on your side, rest your head in your hand and slightly tip your body back and create a little bit of side bending of the torso so the roller moves up and down the outside edge. So again, if you stay slightly tipped back, you really get on the outside border of the scapula of the shoulder blade. And here again, I'm just going to get smaller and smaller, sort of identifying an area I want to work on for the shear, releasing my hand from my head, and just 4 times arcing my arm forward and back, making sure that I'm not on the armpit. If I stay leaning back, I'll really remain on the compression on the blade. And then again, I'm just going to turn my body back into the roller and rest here for a moment, giving the tissue time to adapt. Then to get on the arm, I'm going to come up, scoop my arm under my body, resting my arm on the roller where the deltoid tapers into the arm muscles, taking my top hand and using it as a platform for my forehead. And then again, I'm going to begin my gliding up and down my arm by kind of curling my body more inward, more like a crunch than a rib side bend to create that gliding action. Getting smaller and smaller and smaller here, then I'll wait and I'll create the rotation with my arm for the indirect shear or the punching forward and back for the direct shear. And then I'll just wait here for a moment, give the tissue a moment to adapt. Then I'm going to come up, I'm going to take my right hand behind me, palm face down. I'm going to allow my chest to rest onto the roller. I'm going to use that top hand as a platform for my head. And same thing, I'm going to glide over the front of my chest and the front of my shoulder, really trying to focus mostly on the chest in this motion. Again, identifying any tenderness or areas that don't feel quite sliding in their surface. And then again, I want to shear either by just shifting my body left to right for that cross friction, or if I'm comfortable to set my hand down, sometimes it's easier to navigate for a moment the shear by just keeping both hands on the ground. And then again, I'm going to wait here for a moment, give the tissue a second to adapt. So now that you've created all of that motion, let's try our rinse. So you guys are going to bring the roller back behind your head, lift up your hips, start up at the top of the shoulder blades, take a breath in, and on an exhale, like a steamroller, you'll just start to drag down your back until your butt starts to track itself toward the floor. With your knees away from your ankles, you'll lift up your hips to return your knees back up to the top, and on a nice, slow, steady exhale, you'll rinse down your back. 2 more times, you'll lift up, rinsing down, and 1 more time, lifting up and rinsing down. Then sit your hips down to the floor, create your basic pelvic tuck with the bottom of the shoulder blade still on your side of the roller. Let's reassess our ability to create rib length and just notice what we feel in the chest. And then create our side bend, side bending a little to the right, taking a breath into the left side, coming back through the center and side bending to the left, increasing the pull on the right side. Noticing if we move any further or if it's easy for us to move from side to side. In a future sequence, we'll also add the rib gliding and the sternal release sequence to this sequence so that we actually combine them together and create something that's close to a map. You're almost creating melt mapping. All you're missing is a rebalance.